So, for coming up with a story, first thing I like to think about is who is my story about? So I want to kind of come up with a few different characters, particularly the first character, my main character. Who is my hero? I want to think about that. So for this story, I was trying to think, what do I want to do? And I was thinking, I like fairy tales. I think a fun story would be to write a story about a knight. But I don't want to write about an older knight. I want to write about a young knight. So I'll have him, instead of being a knight, I'll make him a squire. So he's going to be a young squire. So he's a young knight. Okay. And then just trying to think, what are a few different character traits I could give him. He's going to be young, so I'll just have him inexperienced. And I'll make him brave. We all like a brave character. So I've got inexperienced, a brave character. Now, there's a lot more I could say about my hero, but I think I'm just gonna move on. I'm not even gonna come up with a sidekick or a villain yet. I'm gonna start thinking, well, where does this story take place? And I was just coming up with it. Got a squire. Let's have a medieval castle. That gives us kind of a time period and a location. And gonna move on. Medieval castle. The castle's got to be in a place. The place I'm going to have just a majestic forest, a huge forest. It's a fantastic story, and so I'll give it just huge trees. So like unbelievably big trees. It's a majestic forest with huge trees, and this is just the brainstorming. So if this stuff, if I don't like it, if I don't want to keep it, I can always throw it out. Here I'm just getting ideas down. One of the keys to making a good story is to remember that ideas are cheap. I want to get ideas down. You need to have them. But that's only just the first part of the story. It's what you do with those ideas that makes the story good. So I now have, when does my story take place? I always want to think about this. And clearly there's a medieval castle, there's a squire. It's some sort of medieval age. So it's an age of swords. But my story is in a fantastic world. So it's a medieval time period in a fantastic world. If you were doing a real world story, coming up with this when would be much more important, to get a fairly specific date. It's always good to know, just in case you want to mention who the president or prime minister or queen is at that time. If you have a date, you can use it, and you can build off of that for historical information. But a fantastic story, all I need to know is a medieval time period. Then I have what happens. This is a big part of the story. It's a huge part of the story to figure out what happens, what's a problem that must be solved. Thinking that this is a fantastic world, I kind of like the idea of dragons. I like the knight fighting the dragon. So I'm going to have the problem that must be solved is that a dragon is going to kidnap the king. And it ends up being up to the young squire to save him, which is why he's our hero. He's the one that's going to go and try and save him. This problem is part of a greater problem that there's a war between the people and dragons. So in the midst of this battle that's been going on, a dragon kidnaps the king. There's my problem. It has to be solved. It's an idea. Now if you look, I have a lot of lines and very little writing. This is because you never know how much brainstorming you're going to want to do. You might come up with a great idea for your story before you really build it out, right? You can write this whole thing, but then for where your story takes place or when, you might have a very little idea, and so you only have a little bit written down. That's fine. The idea is to at least get ideas down so that when you start planning, when you actually start building this story, you have something to go off of. Even if that means you have an idea and you choose to go elsewhere, you at least have something you can start with. So why does this happen? I was just kind of thinking, well, what do dragons want? Dragons normally want gold, so I'm just going to say the dragons want the humans' gold. Dragons, despite their strength, struggle to mine. Humans have nimble fingers and they're able to mine for gold. So I have them, the dragons wanting human gold. Dragons are greedy. We'll see, who knows, maybe when I'm writing my story, that'll change. But for now, that's an idea that I want to go with. I at least have a reason. The dragons, reason for kidnapping the king. It makes sense. We all understand greed. And how is the problem solved? There's going to be a lot to it, but right now I'm just going to say the squire, he saves the king. So the squire's going to go after the dragon, save the king. That's my brainstorming. I could think, hey, wait a minute, who could be a sidekick? Or who could be a villain? Well, the villain, I already know who the villain is. It's a dragon. Can make him a red, fire-breathing dragon. I already know that the king is going to be a character. I could write him down. Just to get ideas, just to get that brain working, to start creating the story. As you get ideas down, as you have them written down, hey, here's something I have. Now that it's written down, it'll start developing. It'll start working in my brain, even when I'm not writing. Taking some time to do this. It's like planting that seed. That seed might not grow like you expected. You might have planted it in a certain place and it grows elsewhere, but at least that seed's planted. Now it can start to grow.